Welcome to The Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is your host, Kate. Leadership and leadership development are the heart of this podcast, and we've devoted time to exploring effective team building from a leader's perspective. But what about building a team of leaders? What's different, and what remains the same? And before we can approach the work of developing a leadership team, we need a goal in mind. We need to understand the traits, capabilities, and nature of a great leadership team. This is an essential first step because these teams are the stewards of an organization's vision and purpose. However, creating interpersonal and strategic alignment is no small feat. This is why I'm happy to be joined today by James Madison, founder and CEO of On Purpose Life. James's work focuses on helping successful and purpose-driven senior leaders identify their true north. He takes this one step further to help them lead successful teams that achieve extraordinary results. Welcome to The Comfy Chairs, James. I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm James Madison, CEO, I like to say, Chief Energy Officer of On Purpose Life, really igniting purpose-driven leadership for leaders, taking high achievers into making them high-impact leaders with teams. That's what I love to do. And people say, like, okay, but what does all that mean? I really help people get clear, get out of their way, and create amazing things because it's the middle part, get out of their way. That usually is where people are stuck.
Yeah.
Including myself.
Right. That's kind of what we were talking about in
That's
our
what we were
warm-up,
saying, right?
isn't it? Yeah, sometimes you just have to take the time to understand, what am I trying to do?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I am so excited that we get to talk about leadership teams. I know it is your passion. It definitely connects to the things that I think are important in supporting the leaders of the present and the future. And I think where I'd like us to start our conversation is this idea that while every team has its own unique needs and circumstances that may vary based on their composition, their industry, their region, I do think it's safe to say that there are common traits or characteristics of a great leadership team. So I'd like us to start by naming those and talking about kind of the whys and wherefores of those traits.
Absolutely. That to me, it doesn't matter what industry, what they're doing, nonprofit, big company, public, there are some golden threads. And to me, it starts with purpose. Look, my company's called On Purpose Life for a reason, but it starts with a purpose, like why do we exist? Oftentimes when people go do the other things, the strategies, the tactics, and they're not clear on the purpose, they never get to where they're going because they haven't really figured out why they do what they do. And I love to really help reground teams, even if it's the small team or the leadership at the top. Why do you do what you do? Not how do you do it or what do you do? Everybody can talk about that, but really getting grounded, because what happens when you understand purpose is there's a greater alignment of every action, every thought, every decision. That's that true north that I talk about. So to me, purpose and alignment, it starts with that.
Love it. I love it. I think something I would add that in my mind connects very closely, but I may need to explain it more, is that in addition to having that clarity of purpose, there also needs to be a certain level of humility and curiosity that the team shares, not just the individuals, but that the team recognizes we have more to learn. We are not there yet. Which I think ties to purpose because it tells a story that we are working towards this thing with each other. Right. Otherwise, you've done the job, turn off the lights and go home, right?
Right.
So what are some other traits that you would highlight?
So here's the one that ties directly to what you just said that I would go to next. Vision. What does it look like in the future? That's the aim. It isn't necessarily a destination, but the vision stretches people. There's the curiosity, the creativity. It actually calls people to a higher place, higher skills, higher levels of collaboration, higher innovation, like we were just talking about
Yeah.
tools, AI tools. But when you have a vision of what it looks like, I did an exercise with a team 2 years ago, actually now, had them all close their eyes. Some of them laid on the floor.
Okay.
And I said, I want you to, and I walked them through a day, 7 years
Mm.
from now or then, 2030. Imagine you get up and you eat breakfast, and I walked them through their town and all, and they got to see first what it looked like. Then I had them come back in the room, wake up, right,
Hmm.
and write it all down. And then they shared it, and there were some of the most amazing, like you said, curiosity, dreams about how the city would look and what went on.
Mm.
Well, that picture is the basis for all the work that we're doing, and that says we're going to get there. There's things we're doing today we need to stop doing, and there's things that we're not doing today that we need to start doing. It's kind of that, if you've heard of that book, 10x is easier than 2x. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but
I
it's kind
haven't.
of, that's the idea, is when you have a picture of the future vision, yourself or the organization, it makes it really clear to look at today and go, there are things that will prevent us getting there, and there are things we need to start doing. It gets really clear. So
Yeah.
to your point, that brings out that creativity
Mhm.
in people and curiosity.
Yeah. This is a shameless self plug, by the way, James. I apologize, but not entirely for it. I cannot support your comments about vision enough because I am currently working toward putting out a workbook for folks on creating a personal vision statement.
Yes,
Yeah, so I'm
yes.
hoping that that'll
Uh-huh.
be out in the next month or so if I can,
Uh,
kind of keep things moving forward. But purpose and vision are one closely linked, and without having that picture of the future that you put yourself in,
Yep,
whether again it's an individual or as a team or an organization, you're just going to ramble around, and
yeah,
that's waste at best. At the
totally.
best of times it's just waste of time and effort, but leadership teams have to. I In my introduction I talked about how they're stewards of vision and purpose and culture.
Absolutely. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, and that
mm,
understanding that they don't necessarily own it in
hmm.
the terms of it's shared with everyone, but they have to hold it carefully. And
That's
that
right.
stewardship mindset, I think, is another key part. The leadership teams that understand that they make decisions, but they're kind of the emissary for client, the company, the workforce.
That's right.
So important.
That's right. The word I use is cast a vision. I love
Yes.
this idea of casting, like you cast a fishing rod, it's like throwing it out there
Mm-hmm.
and then stepping back and seeing what it will take to get there. I just coached a leader just before we got on, and as we were going through some questions, she got to this place of, well, here's what I told her. Your team is perfectly designed to get the results that you're complaining about because you've set up the structure to deliver those results. That's your job as the leader. We're
Yes.
perfectly designed. You're an OD person. We're perfectly designed to get the results we achieve.
That's exactly right.
So don't be disappointed. And she went, and I said, what's causing? She went, oh my God. So I had to do this exercise to create the perfect system for screwing
Hmm.
things up.
Right?
It sounds kind of counterintuitive. Like, what's your perfect
No.
system for having to do the work for your team? And she laughed, and so she told me her perfect system because she does it well. Right. And what she realized is like, oh, I don't ever share the vision with them. Matter of
Uh-huh.
fact, I don't even take time to create the vision. We're on a hamster wheel. And she went, oh, there was her insight.
Right?
So at the end of our
That's
session,
magnificent.
we spent time She said, well, how do I find time to be strategic? So we went through her calendar,
Mm.
and she has now put an hour block on the calendar every day to sit in that space and come up with ahas and dream and think so she can get out of managing and start leading her team.
Hmm.
So you're right, that vision purpose thing, leadership 101 after people.
Well, that's a really great point too. That one of the things that you coached this leader toward is taking time to think.
Yes,
Great teams recognize the value of thought,
that's right. Of
which I understand why so many leaders get caught in the trap of busy.
course.
The modern world demands that we be at a full out dead run, especially at work. And having time carved out to sit and think can be very, very like peer pressure type challenge.
Absolutely.
But leaders have to do it. They have to. It's not just,
Otherwise, mhm,
yeah, it's not just authors or quote unquote thought leaders. Leaders have to think,
that's right.
and the
That's right.
teams
And what
need to value it. Sorry.
they do. No, so what I helped her with, because there was that counterbalance of feeling guilty for carving that out and not going to certain meetings. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Finish the sentence. When I create time to strategically think, the value to my team is, and we came up with 10 things.
Yeah.
So she could see, they can see the picture, they can take initiative, they feel responsible, they're more accomplished, there's better like all. So I said, let's flip it around. When you don't carve out that time, you are the limit to your team doing all these things. Then
Mm-hmm.
it was like,
Yeah.
I'm the limit to my team growing, you're the lid.
Mm-hmm. And my guess is, just based on my own experience and observation, that the time that she's giving back, the meetings and those other activities that are now being replaced by her becoming a strategic thinker, those are probably places where her folks are going to have more freedom. It's not going to be the boss is watching us at any moment. We can't take action without her. It's not just growth, but she's also creating more autonomy that way,
That's
because the
right.
business doesn't depend upon her to be present to make things happen.
You got it.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last piece of it is before that, we had worked on the story she had in her head that busy equals worthy. We all
Mm-hmm.
have a story from childhood that we made up a
Oh,
lie about
yeah.
ourselves, and that drives us. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. Well, we remove that story. Well, guess why her system was set up the way it is? It wasn't for the team, it was to feed the story.
Mm-hmm.
We had to remove the story for her to see. It was just exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, one of the notes I made on this topic was role clarity, but I think it's also like self identity clarity too,
Yes,
which goes back a little bit to the humility, right? And purpose. If I am here for this reason, where do my strengths support it? And where do I need to mitigate and manage my weaknesses?
right.
And I have to understand I'm making decisions based on the story I tell myself about myself
That's right.
as well. It's ugh, it's hard, humbling work if you're willing to lead that way, and I think it is the right way to lead.
Yeah.
But let's take it back to that team
Okay.
setting.
Yes.
So I want to refer back to some of the questions I posed in the introduction, James. So there's team building, and then there's leadership team building. What's the same, and what's different about them?
Yeah. What I thought about that, if I really, at the simplest level, the difference between the two is the level of impact
Mm-hmm.
that the senior team can have on an organization versus any team. But if you looked at them side by side, some of the elements are the same, right? It's again that vision and purpose and alignment. You just mentioned clear roles and structure. It's good communication and conflict management. And a lot of teams avoid conflict, which the
Mm-hmm.
best teams, the championship teams have conflict. They're good at navigating conflict to get the best.
Yeah.
1 + 1 = 11 when you allow for conflict, right? And you don't avoid it. Communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different communication styles. And it's not a style of communication. Each person has a different perspective and a lens. And it's tension that's created when they bring their lens. And if their lens is informed by the story about their own personal belief about themselves, like I just talked about, that adds a whole other dynamic. Imagine a team of 14 people. I don't know what the math is on how many relationships there are. Think about 1 and 13 and 1 and 13 and do in multi.
Mm-hmm.
There's I don't know hundreds of relationships that are going on. So there's going to be conflict. There's going to be different communication styles, and that doesn't matter what type of team it is. But
Yeah.
that senior team, if they don't get good at that, it affects everything. I mean, that is the lid. A statement I heard recently said the relational health of an executive team directly impacts the relational health of the organization and the level of
Yes.
business success, period.
Yes.
You got 160 having relationships going on and trying to make that work. That's why the impact might be different because the scope of responsibility is so much
Hmm.
greater.
I think level of impact and also level of intent, like the intentionality. And
Yes.
I don't want to like eschew frontline team building. There has to be intention. There has to be thought put into it. But I think just like the impact becomes exponential, the intent has to be exponential, which is kind of ironic because in my experience, I think there's this presumption that, oh, we're senior leaders. We just know how to do this. And I am sorry, but no, it has to
No.
be so intentional how you're crafting the relationships, how you're looking at the balances, the where strengths and weaknesses, really putting the puzzle pieces together. It's the difference, I would say, between like 100-piece puzzle and 1,000-piece puzzle.
Mhm.
And there's still challenge with 100 pieces. Team building is still a challenge, but because of the intricacies and the complexity, the higher you go in the organization, the amount of planfulness and mindfulness that goes into that leadership team's formation and
Yes.
constantly reforming has to be accounted for. And I think it's a missed opportunity in so many organizations.
That's right. Here's the other big thing that I've seen, and I say this to a lot of executives. The things that you did in your career that got you promoted to this table
Mm-hmm.
are very different than the things that are going to help you be successful at this table. It isn't about running a function and an operation. It is now about influence, people that don't report to you. It's about connecting the dots. It's about actually challenging in somebody else's backyard that's not yours because you are now sitting at the round table that runs a business and not a function. Not everybody makes that leap. Not everybody who was a superstar is a superstar at the executive table. Different set of skills.
I think we need to normalize that it is entirely acceptable to be amazing in a particular area, to be able to lead a division. Frankly, I couldn't operate a maintenance department. And I'm a pretty like agile learning kind of gal, but I couldn't do it. That doesn't mean that I'm not capable of being great where I am or that I'm not capable of X, right? It has to be okay that not everyone ends up in the C suite.
That's right.
And we have to honor the roles that do things like expert level executive leadership outside of the C suite. I don't know about you, James. This is the direction I'm kind of drifting at the moment, but I have just witnessed any number of C-suite level teams in organizations that it is like the in group and the out group.
Yes.
And
Totally.
it one, the relationship shouldn't be functioning like high school cliques. It shouldn't be positioned that way. My opinion is that one of the things that approach or those attitudes end up resulting in is that it makes it seem like it's an easy job to do, to sit in that boardroom.
Mm, mm,
It's not.
mm,
And part of the reason it's not is because of the variety of relationships that have to be maintained. It's not just all decision making and galas and big paychecks. It is hard work that demands a lot of people. And that I think needs to be more, again, normalizing that not everybody needs to be in the C suite to achieve a lifetime goal or to be a
right.
success. And that it's hard work that, frankly, a lot of us don't want to do.
Right. Yeah, and some people are not going to be good at it because what
No.
they did to get there won't, and it's this fallacy that, oh, I did a good, let's promote them to that. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's then what you get, those factions like you talked about. I call it Survivor Island.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's the alliances that go on
Mm-hmm.
because people aren't necessarily in the right role or whatever the case may be. And that becomes the biggest barrier to the team's relational health, creating the organizational health, creating the business results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's interesting is the whole like what got you here won't get you there
Yes.
is true even for those teams. Like what got you to the start of 2025 may not get you to the end of it. Just the
That's right.
nature of how rapidly things are changing and unfolding, and that level of agility and nimbleness is so important for the health. And to your point, I think you're making a really good point here, James, that all of this hinges upon are there healthy relationships? Probably more so even than like subject matter expertise or I don't know, intelligence or other factors. Can
Mhm.
How do you go about measuring the health of the relationships on a team?
Gosh, so some of the next things that I was going to share really gets into trust.
Yes.
Trust is the foundation. Like without trust, do not pass go. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you've got alignment and vision and you've got roles and you've got alignment and structure, it comes down to trust. And then trust is built through communication, how they navigate conflict. These are some of the things to actually work on. What does accountability look like in terms of people stepping up? How about a old term from back in the day, coaching and feedback? Are people open and receptive? We used to have coaching and feedback models,
I don't
but
like
like, are
thinking
you
about those
open?
as like old school terms. I feel those
That was
are
that was our term,
evergreen.
evergreen coaching and feedback. And so evaluating how well or how not well they do that is a real good thermometer on the health of a team.
Yeah.
Um, I've worked with teams where we do the retreat and everybody's happy and smiling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I hear about the back channel conversation about what went on, right? Because there isn't that level of trust.
Yeah.
And people have felt like, hey, that's going to be used against me. So that vulnerability to really connect is at the root to me of all the other things building on top.
We're kind of tiptoeing around some of the classic team performance models, like the Anderson
Mhm.
forming, norming. There's
Yes.
the Drexler Sibbett team performance model. And I'll put links into these, but I love that model because it gives you this kind of like almost like energy effort curve too
Yes.
of when you're orienting, you're kind of figuring out who am I, who are you, why are we here. It takes a lot more energy even than getting to that place of, oh, now we can start doing the work.
Exactly. And I also you're familiar with Patrick Lencioni's five
Yes,
dysfunctions of a team, right?
I've
Those
heard some
are
of that there too. Yeah.
yeah, you hear some of those weaved in because I think it starts with trust, communication,
Mm-hmm.
conflict, focus on results. Like those are some of the basic things for every team. But to your point, it's very different at an executive team level because there is different pressures, number one. There's different levels of accountability. I would tell you that many of the things that I go and talk about and do in the boardroom with these top executives are the same principles I learned on third shift as a team leader making dog food 30 years ago.
Yep. This is one of the things I love about the type of work that you and I do, James. I refer to it as the dirty secret of leadership development coaching. It's not rocket science. It really
Mm-mm.
isn't. The stuff is all really easy, actually,
Yeah,
right? Like, oh, you have to have trust present. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. The hard work
uh-huh.
is when you start adding human beings into the equation and we
That's
make it
right.
so messy. One of the things that you and I joked around about when we were first, talking about you joining me here on the podcast was the whole idea of, oh, it's just all about getting these leaders to play well together, to play nice.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah. And joking aside, I do think having an element of fun and joy like we're having right now, it's
Yes,
key to those healthy relationships.
it is.
But that team's there to get something done. So
That's
how
right.
do how do you recommend, how do we help those teams balance the light and the challenge.
Yeah, that is the balance, right? And so the way I do it is everything we do is with the intent to do the work. It
Mm-hmm.
isn't just how do we feel? Did that feel good? It's like, let's do the thing that's vulnerable, that's connecting, that's getting us to build the relationship. And now let's take that relationship and apply it towards actual work. Like bringing those two together. Like if I do a retreat, that's usually the beginning. Is getting the connecting going through different exercises. And then what's the challenge on the table that they've brought? They usually bring a real challenge. We might do a simulation of some sort, but let's take something you're really working on, break out into groups of three with exercises, come back and teach each other and share. But it's something when they leave, they actually go and apply.
Mm-hmm.
The process, I help create a process for strategic decision making for a team and that I found. Again, not rocket science, but just kind of the basic
Yeah.
steps. They worked through an actual exercise that day. I coached a guy yesterday who showed me the laminated version of his. He's got those 10 steps that he talks to his team about and he does, and now they're doing that.
Wonderful.
So it is not just feel good to feel good, but it's connect so that we can perform.
The question I'm trying to form is, what are some connect to perform type activities that you have found to be really effective for teams?
Yeah. So if this here's the belief you have to understand first at the root of these, which is, and I said this to an executive team recently, the things that they come into conflict about, the
Mm.
things that they go into survivor mode about have nothing to do with the business, the dollars, the cents, the things on the table. It has to do with each one of them has this, what I call lying belief about themselves that was formed at 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good enough, smart enough, something enough. And when they're in the room and somebody says something, it activates or triggers that thing. They get taken out. And what you get is the response to that. That's where the real, it's not about the millions of dollars and the people, it's this other thing that's going on. And so what I do is do a lot of work to get to a place of vulnerability with that. And if people can put that aside and recognize that and create from their true identity and not the story they've told themselves, it makes it fertile ground for good things that we plant to actually grow. And so, my favorite question we start out most of these retreats with is we're going to do an exercise called The One Thing I Don't Want You to Know About Me Right Now.
Ooh,
You heard that, right? You felt that.
yeah. Like I
That
my
starts
stomach clenched.
right? And what I find happens is, and I've done this with groups of 250 people at a talk, and when people speak the thing, I just left home and this thing fell and that broke, and just like it could be simple things, it could be deep things. There's this weight that gets lifted and the mask that comes off, and now people get real. And
Mm-hmm.
everything we do after that is at that place of connection because they say, wow, I always say, has anybody ever else felt that? And all the hands go up. Anybody else ever experienced that feeling of not being good enough? And now they go, oh wow, we're all the same with
Mm-hmm.
different little, okay, let's breathe and now build from there.
Yeah. I love that exercise. And what I'm wondering, questioning, finding could be challenging is if you are part of a leadership team that doesn't have a high level of trust yet, is that the right approach? And I think the larger question is, because human beings are trying to keep ourselves safe. We
Yes.
carry around these ideas that I'm going to be hurt by someone or by something. It's just human nature. It doesn't make anyone bad or wrong. Because of that, if there's not yet psychological safety on a team, that trust can't exist. And some people may not be willing to fully participate out of fear. So it, maybe I'm having this cart before the horse, chicken or egg moment. Um, I can see how an exercise like something you don't want to know, I don't want you to know about me, could be a step toward that, to building trust. But if trust is broken or non existent, is that the best place to start?
So here's my experience has been, um, yes, it's always a good place to start because there's
Okay.
different levels of this.
Okay.
And remember, everybody has powerful choice no matter what we're doing. And I've seen some people go in with the crying thing and the tears, the most impactful story, and others say, my cat threw up on my clothes this morning. And okay, and everybody is where they are, and there's no judgment for everybody to be the same. And then as we've done it more, then people may go deeper. But what I typically do is
Mm-hmm.
I go first and I pull out something that's like a gut wrenching heart kind of thing to set the tone. And guess who goes second in the team?
Chief, the
The leader.
executive.
The
Mm-hmm.
leader go.
The leader.
I cue the leader up because usually I'm not working with a leader who doesn't want to do this. Like that's who hires me.
Yeah.
So I have the leader give something like, when I was growing up, I had a single mom, and we did like that sets the tone. And usually people will fall because the leader did, and those that don't will give something a little more surface. No judgment.
Okay.
It's an evolution.
Yeah. I agree with you, by the way. It's just also I feel sometimes we talk about here's the perfect case, and I want listeners who want to try these things themselves to not feel like, I mean, yes, we want them to hire people like us, but I also want leaders to recognize these are things that they can do independent of having a consultant at their elbow.
Absolutely.
Um, and if there is somebody that's part of a leadership team who has the authority to say, hey, let's do this exercise, you're not necessarily going to have this revelatory event, but it's a way to start building toward deeper connection, right, greater trust.
It's an evolution because I've done that, and there's still been deep trust issues because there's other
Mm-hmm.
things going on. But it allowed us to get to those things by at least cracking the surface a little
Mm-hmm.
bit with something personal.
Yeah. Well, that raises another really important point. This is not a one and done proposition.
Journey.
You don't form a team and then it's always the same. Which I one of the things I want, and I shared this in my notes to you, I want for us to spend some time talking about are some of the scenarios where team formation, leadership team formation needs to be kind of extra special given attention to. There are a handful that I outlined for us, and I'd like to go through those, but if there are any others that you think we should cover in addition to or instead, please put your oar in for that. There's the sort of, I almost see it on like this spectrum of challenging but not as challenging to super challenging. And on the somewhat easier, relatively speaking, end is when you have the opportunity to form a new team from scratch.
Right.
So what are some of the approaches, the strategies, the tactics that you find to be especially effective for those brand new teams?
Yeah, so I worked in a facility years ago that was a greenfield site for what we used to call high commitment work systems. Right, so we used to have McKinsey that came into
Oh
the
yeah.
plant. Like it was a big experiment. With I worked for Colgate Palmolive, and so this was a pet food plant, and they decided to make the instead of retrofit to teams, it was a greenfield. Terms that we use, guiding principles, the titles of the leaders. We had a strategic team, a coordinating team, and an operating team. 3 levels. That's it. No mid level, this level, that level. It was all about coaching and feedback. It was all about guiding principles to guide decisions and not having rules. It was all about people will have greater ownership when they're involved in things that impact them, like these things that we learned that got people involved and ownership. And when it came to executing, it took more time up front to do everything,
Mm-hmm.
but the back end execution for everybody was so much better because people had a hand in building whatever, whether it was going from 5 days to 7 day schedules, people got involved and we had teams that met and
Wow.
we went through certain principles. Like, again, it took a lot of work. Execution was so much better. because we got people involved. So I would say getting involved, getting people who are new to a team involved early in whatever's being created is key.
Now, what about an established team that's
Mm,
growing? They're adding new members.
yeah. What I find, I don't know if I told you this last time, but I use an assessment called the Core Values Index.
Okay.
And it's different than a behavior or personality. It's more this innate, unique wiring. I almost call it the DNA of a person.
Oh, does this one give you like, it has like a list of 30 some? I feel like
No,
I've,
no, that's strengths. That's strengths. Strength Finder has 34,
yeah. But the
but
core
this one has
values,
four.
four? Okay, that's a entirely
Yeah, because
different one that I'm
yeah,
thinking of.
because they're not actual core values, they're core value energies. They're these different energies that people bring into the room.
All right.
There's the problem solving energy. There's the vision and
Okay.
connector energy. There's the let's get it done energy. There's the get the detail energy, right? And so, based on knowing what you have on your existing team, can help you understand what you need to add to complement the team you have. I'll give you an example. Sometimes I work with a team who has a lot of creatives, a lot
Mhm.
of problem solvers, and people vision, and they don't have as much of the details or the critical thinking side. And therefore, they will go look for the next person that comes in beyond their experience and their resume and some of the normal things, someone who's wired to complement what they don't have because people tend to hire people like themselves, right?
Yeah. Yes, we do.
And so it's taking inventory of what do you need from skills, from experience, and this kind of wiring, and then literally look for a person that brings that to balance the team out. That's what I found to be helpful.
What about integrating those new members, particularly when you have made the intentional choice to find somebody who's different? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that can be disruptive, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't bad, but
Yes.
still a fact. How to make their assimilation and inclusion in the team um, as smooth as possible.
Yeah. You and I talked about this. Team development is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And where I've seen it done best with a team is we actually met and did this exercise with the team and worked through some things and then collectively identify what was missing, what was needed. When they hired the next person, they hired a person with that kind of a profile because it fit the team. So in the next, I don't know if it was 90 days or 120 days when we came back together, we openly talked about and shared with that person, and they got to understand like why they were there.
Okay.
We showed what the rest of the team looked like and how, and this person said, "Oh, I now see my value. I see that nobody else brings this particular unique thing, and that's my responsibility." And that just made that person feel so good.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. Those are the types of things that any level we should be very
Any level.
transparent about.
That's right.
Okay. Now, I feel like the adding new members has a other side of the coin, and it's pretty timely when we think about um, all of the economic pressures that companies are facing today. We're hearing about
Mm-hmm.
mass layoffs almost daily. When a leadership team has to make changes to its composition and structure because a position's been eliminated, somebody's left the organization and it's not being replaced, that is a process. I think
Mm-hmm.
you can't just treat it like business as usual when people are gone, roles are gone. What what is your advice and your coaching for teams in those circumstances?
Yeah, I'm going to use a metaphor of moving your house.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you move, if you've moved, you find all these things that had just been hanging around, taking up space, and you had no clue until you moved and had the change. And then you go, these boxes have the same tag from 3 moves ago. Haven't opened them. Take them to Goodwill, sell them, get rid of them. But if you don't move, you just create more space. And so with a team, when there's an opening, it's a great opportunity to do an inventory of the things and responsibilities and find out which things should we just stop doing,
Mm.
delete them. And even if we re backfill that, it will never be the same position. it will look different. So we either backfill it or we don't. But we do uh, not reverse engineering, re-engineering
Mm-hmm.
of the role of the processes, and use. I always say it's addition by subtraction. When you take one away, if you do the right work, you actually can get a higher level of performance because you'll find we get comfortable, and the tendency is just to fill up the capacity that you have, and that healthy turnover attrition can really help a team grow.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, this may be a horrible metaphor for this, but when you prune a plant, you get new
Yes. Oh,
growth sometimes. And I guess the sometimes you have to prune to save the
yes.
plant, and other times it happens organically, no pun intended.
No, but I live in Arizona, and out here in front of my building, they will prune these trees, and I think that they're dead. They look
Mm-hmm.
dead to me. I mean, and I know that was painful for the tree or the bush. And then the spring comes, and they're beautiful because
Mm-hmm.
the main parts of it that needed the resources were being starved out by all the dead pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And when you prune, so that's your point. When someone leaves, that's a chance to prune.
Mm-hmm.
And what comes out of that can be beautiful with that new season, new energy. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good metaphor. I love that.
My sardonic self is having a moment, and I feel like um I have to account for it. I have to balance it out and say, we're not saying that people that leave the organization under these circumstances are dead wood.
No, no, no,
That's not the
no.
case, but it's the team development is ongoing, and there's a process, and there are points where the team and that senior most executive, you have the opportunity to reimagine, re-engineer. Sometimes you choose those opportunities, and sometimes they are chosen for you. There are times, though, where somebody's not going to have the awareness.
Sure.
Leaders are not going to have the courage to address it in a timely fashion. And it will create breaks in the relational health of that team. With an established team that maybe has gone through turmoil like that, of having people who are not matched to the role. Not that they're bad, but that it's not a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
How can, when that situation has been corrected, ideally, how do you think teams can reform trust with each other?
Yeah, that's a great question because before I get to that, what I see is that leaders hesitate to deal with that
Mm-hmm.
wrong fit for concern about how the one person will take it. And what they don't realize is it's caused a
Mm-hmm.
metastasized cancer in the organization by tolerating that,
Yes.
especially at a high level. That erodes the culture, right? So
Mm-hmm.
once, and I've had to challenge some leaders to really do that. And again, the person was happy, the organization was happy, but I think they needed to just take responsibility for the decision. Hey, sometimes we get it wrong. Leaders don't get it right all the time, but we've taken it. This is what's happening. And then the person they bring in is the proof. And did they learn anything? Right? I think they say hire, hire slow, fire quick. I think is what they say, or something like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
hire very slow, like really,
Yeah.
because once you get a person, you've got them. And even if they end up leaving, there's an impact on the culture that creates scars, honestly, and we don't always get it right.
I think it can be really easy for senior executives to forget that people are always watching.
Always like
And
parents.
yeah, in a lot of ways, a lot like parents. And I don't fault them for forgetting how fishbowl their lives are, because they have work preoccupying them
Yes,
constantly. But their decisions, their actions, their lack of action, it is always being watched.
always on display.
Mm-hmm. And right or wrong, judged.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like that, the pedestal thing, the judgment. And
Mm-hmm.
you and I know this from Leadership 101. Leaders are held to a higher standard,
Mm-hmm.
period.
Yeah.
If that's not for you, don't get in that game because don't hate the player, hate the game. That is the game of
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah. It's one of those, it's not fair, but to quote my father, Kate, life isn't fair.
That's right. There's a risk reward there for leaders.
Mm-hmm. All right, so those are the hard, the challenging, the ones we hope we never
Yes.
have to address. Let's talk about a fun one.
Okay.
What about when you have a great team and you want to move them to that quote unquote next level, to take a high
Mhm.
performing team even further? That is a special type of development and probably requires some unique tactics in and of its own. What are your thoughts?
Starts with the leader. It requires a special leader.
Yeah.
Not everybody is cut out to lead a team that's high performing and wants to grow. That's where they have to get out of the way. There has to be that humility
Mm,
that they've hired people. Good, I always say great leaders hire people above them, people that know more than them. That's a
yes.
great leader. And that's not every leader. Some people are threatened by that. But if you recognize, first of all, it's about the team, I'm the servant leader who stands in front of the team to defend them, comes alongside the team to support them, and behind the team when the team's getting accolades. Like that's the type of leader that has to be present. So it starts with the leader. And then it's really about unleashing in each team member what's in them to reach their full potential, to be themselves, to do the things that light them up. One thing about the core values index is it predicts the type of work by the energy that you most have that you'll find most rewarding and fulfilling and energizing. And so there's a team I'm thinking about that's probably exactly what we're talking about. And we've
Yeah.
spent a lot of time helping them understand themselves, the work, and matching their level of excitement and impact to the work. And the leader kind of matches those things up and puts those together and then steps back, creates the vision, helps them understand the why, boundaries maybe on the what, but doesn't get involved in the how. Like that stage, we used to call it stage 4. You start to get towards self-directed at stage 5, but moving from 3 to 4 is when you kind of help with that and then step back and then become more of a resource to the team than the person out front driving the bus.
Yeah. I was reminded one of our favorite TV shows in my home is a show that didn't get enough credit. It was sort of a flash in the pan, unfortunately, but it's amazing. Highly recommend. It's called Sports Night. It's
Sports
a
night.
it's
Okay.
a show about a sports show that's not about sports. You know, that's like kind of what the show is.
Uh-huh.
And Robert Guillaume plays like the
Ah,
chief
yeah.
in
Uh-huh.
the production crew for this show. A character named Isaac Jaffe, and he's having this moment of confrontation with one of his on air talent, talking about trust essentially. And he's like,
Yes.
it's being a good leader means that you bring smart people in. Being a smart leader means you bring people smarter than you in.
That's the statement.
I hired you because you are smarter at this. You are smarter
That's right.
than you are behaving in this moment. Do better, do different. And
Yes.
it's that's something that I think is really important for leaders. We talked about humility. You have to have the courage to say I'm not going to be the best, but I can make the team the best.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's funny because when I was in that team-based plan, I was a team leader,
Hmm.
leading a team, right? And then I went into more of a support role, working with materials or something kind of offline from operations. And we had a team in our plant that made the canned food, not the dry.
Okay.
And I would describe them as a stage 4 team. They'd all come together, started to plan up. They kind of were autonomous and they needed kind of an advisor. So that was my title. I was the advisor. I wasn't the team leader. They played the team leadership. I was the advisor that connected to the leadership at and
Hmm.
I got them what they needed, but that was very different. My role had to change there because they knew way more than I was ever going to know or ever wanted to know. But there were some things I could help stretch them in and grow as an advisor and a coach, right, to that team. One of my best jobs because they were already there. So it comes down to the leader's ability to adapt to the type
Hmm.
of leadership that the team needs.
This has me getting curious. I'm thinking about somebody who is in the C-suite. They are a senior leader. They may not be the senior leader, and they're looking around at their experience on this leadership team. what are some of the indicators to help them understand, hey, I'm on a team that has high psychological safety. We have healthy relationships.
Hmm.
I'm on a team that maybe does need to work on its trust.
Hmm.
Or other, what are some of the indicators that those folks will experience? And I'll stop there. I do have a follow on
Okay.
question, but I don't want to overload.
One of what I've experienced, there are things that are not said in the room on the topic that then go get discussed in little pockets outside.
Mm,
People know about. Everybody knows. It's like, call it the pocket veto, right? We're going to sit here and we're going to talk about it and we're going to engage, but people hold back on what they really think. And
mm-hmm.
then they go off in these little rooms and they talk about each other. And
Yeah.
everybody knows it because everybody's part of it. So it's not like one person, but that's a sign. I think it's Patrick Lencioni again, the first team concept, which
Mm-hmm.
I love the first team concept. And I found 12 behaviors of the first team. And we identified like what are the top three for this team. Number one was goals and objectives alignment. Number two was the ability to have tough conversations and conflict to get to a consensus.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get close and then bail out. You actually have to go through the tough conversation. But the number three they recognizes was supporting each other after the decision,
Mm,
supporting as one after the decision, not going back to your department and saying, well, the leadership team. No,
mm-hmm.
no, you own it. You're one of the 14. When you go back in, we're being intentional about everything's on the table. We've got a decision. Even if you disagree and it's not what you would you agree to support? It's not a vote. For the four people that say no, okay, we always go back to them. I learned this in the plant years ago. You four that said this is not what you would do if your name was on the building, do you agree to support the decision of the team? And we want a yes from everybody,
Yeah.
right? Now, what does support look like outside of this room? What's the communication plan? What's the strategy? There cannot be any chink in the armor of saying, well, I don't agree. Nope. You agreed to support.
Yep. My father taught management. So he and I spend a lot of time talking about leadership
Gosh, yeah.
behaviors. And I don't know if he came up with this, if it came from someplace else, but I've stolen it from him. And it's this idea that in some settings, your responsibility is to support, submit, or withdraw.
Ooh, I like that.
And we've talked about that actually within faith communities,
Mm-hmm.
that the job is not to be a rabble rouser if you disagree with the decisions
Right.
being made. But I see it play out in leadership as well, particularly if I'm going to hold an executive position and take a lot of money, which is usually the case, that I either need to be a supporter, I need to submit, even if I said no, if I'm going to stay with that company and I'm going to be part of the changes and decisions, then I submit. I agree to support once we leave the room, or you need to leave. It's not
Mm,
an
mm,
option to stay
mm,
and be a dissenter,
mm-hmm.
not just for the integrity of the organization and the team, but if you really have problems, it's about your personal
Yes,
integrity then.
that's right. I love that.
Yeah.
That's so good. I don't know if I told you, but I'm part of an executive MBA, no, an MBA program mentor for the
Oh,
MBA program at ASU.
wonderful.
And we get together and do these topics. And the last one was followership, which is
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there was a panel, and I remember one guy, they had a nice 2 by 2 grid on what followership looked like. And we talked about to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, right? But one guy said he has a 2 pass rule. So when he brings something to his boss or whoever's in charge, he'll take one pass at it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say no, whatever, he'll take a second pass because sometimes things need to soak and steep. And after two, he's shifting. He
Yeah.
figures they've got what they need. It's my time to, support, submit, typically not withdraw. But the
Yeah.
idea is I'm going to do 2 passes and I know that they've got it and I trust that they know something I don't know and I move on. I love this, what you just laid out.
I have that mental model of support, submit, withdraw that informs this. It's the behind closed doors. When I've been part of leadership teams and decisions are being made, if it's not appropriate for the team discussion, because sometimes even even that, you need to take it into a one-on-one with your executive, whoever that senior leader is in your structure. You're like, the door is shut. I have concerns. I want to be able to discuss this with you. And you can tell me, no, this is the decision. And when we leave, as long as I have the freedom, the agency to disagree with you here in this appropriate setting, then yeah, I will be your girl. And if we can't do that, then I'm not the right person for this job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What's funny, Kate, is that's what led me into coaching. I had that conversation with my last boss,
Yeah.
and it was the withdrawal. When I got really clear that what it took to be successful going forward, because the organization had changed, right? So before
Mm-hmm.
it was one thing, and all of a sudden I felt set free when he described what it would take to what success looked like. I went, that's not me, and that I don't ever want that to me. And I was set
Mm-hmm.
free, and I withdrew, and we came up with a plan, and it was this exactly what you said. It just
Yeah.
wasn't my place anymore. But I'm not going to spend any stress trying to make it work because we kind of both came to that at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And it was this great, wow, I can now be set free and look at what I'm doing. It set me up
Yeah.
to do this. And he said to me, you really get excited when it comes to people and their growth and their development of your team. You need to be doing that full time.
Mm-hmm.
Voila.
Yeah. Well, I was taking this approach of like, oh, they're making these bad choices and I can't live with it anymore. There can also be a highly positive, like the company is moving in a direction that is wonderful for it, but I'm at a point in my career or my personal life or my own interests where I'm no longer aligned with that.
Bingo. Yeah.
So I can stay and I can be a problem or I can choose to leave. It's interesting to me, James, we kind of keep defaulting. We're talking about teams and team dynamic and team characteristics, but we kind of keep coming back to those individual leaders as well.
That's
And
yeah, you're
you
right.
can't, there is no, this one comes first or this one comes next. That those great leadership teams are made of great leaders. Not perfect
Yeah. No,
by
but
any
but
stretch
great.
because they're people, but great leaders make great teams. So,
You're absolutely right. And here's the thread that I see that the big thing for any leader is this continuum between control and surrender.
oh,
Let me tell you this blew my mind when I figured this out, and I see it everywhere. So we know what happens when we try to control situations that are out of our control. It results in stress, worry, anxiety, doubt, panic, fear, heart attacks, and all the vices of the world to deal with the stress that's created, right? We all know that. Burnout. Surrender does not look like wave the white flag, does not look like give up. Surrender says it is what it is, and I have a powerful choice in the next move. There are no victims, only willing participants. So it is happening. It's going whatever. And here's the key that unlocks it. Acceptance does not mean agreement.
yes.
Accepting what is, I used to think acceptance meant I'm agreeing, so I don't accept that. That's what I don't accept. No, 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 no. Accept it is what it is. You don't have to agree. And you still always have powerful choice. If a leader can get that into their brain, an employee, it makes dealing with all the things that are out of control, out of their control, so much easier because they, like you said, withdrawal can be a choice. I
Mm-hmm.
left. That was my choice. I accepted it. I didn't argue when he told me what it was. I went, that's not for me.
Right?
And I moved on. Right. We always have that
Yeah.
choice.
Well, we live by this fallacy. It's such flawed logic that choice means we're always happy about it. You do always have a choice in
Choice.
at least in this context, right? You may not like your choices, but you
Absolutely.
have a choice.
You
And
do have a choice.
recognizing that and kind of embracing, I love this powerful choice, willing participant. I have agency. I may not
Agency.
enjoy the choice that I have to make. I may not
Yes.
like my options, but I still have the power of choice in this setting.
Always. always.
And I think leaders have to constantly recognize if you have the authority of a senior level position, things are not happening to you. You know, there are events that may be outside of your control, but you always have choice.
But you love this great visual. I say, when you point at somebody or point at something that's causing it, there's three fingers pointing right back at you.
Yeah.
Right? That's where you get to use your agency, and that's where leaders are made.
Mm-hmm.
Extraordinary leaders are made.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we can do any better than that statement, Mr.
That
Madison.
feels like
That
a mic
is,
drop moment, doesn't
it
it?
does. Totally. Like, hats off to you. Yeah, I'm like almost afraid to keep talking because that was so perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna wrap us up then beautifully and ask, do you have any additional thoughts that you'd like to share? I know that you were telling me that you've kind of got sort of a refresh and re-energized approach to what you're doing this year. If there's anything like that that you would like to share, please do. And then we'll say our goodbyes, sir.
Yeah, what I say to any leaders listening, right, is really understand at the core the value that you bring, the unique value that
Mm-hmm.
you bring anywhere that's transferable, and the impact that you want to create in the world, right? We live a created life, not
Mm.
a reported on life, but we can live a created life if we understand our value and the impact that we want to create. That's legacy stuff, right? That is more than success. That is more like significance, right? So that's what I'd say. That's what I learned. And for me, it's really helped me focus on these, leadership and team performance at the highest levels. Because when I'm working with a senior executive team that leads a 3,200 person organization, guess whose impact also is magnified? Mine,
Mm-hmm.
which is part of my purpose to ignite purposeful growth. That just gets magnified by those leaders, which also fills my cup. So that's what I love to do. That's why I love doing the things I do. Those are the things my clients get from me. I love talking to you. This has been like the most engaging, thought-provoking. Leadership is a passion of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of bad leadership out there,
Yes,
and there's
there
a lot of
is.
extraordinary leadership, and there's a lot of room for growth.
Mm-hmm.
So I just love camping out in the body of knowledge of leadership. Um, so I just thank you for having me on. It's been great.
It has been a pleasure. And I have to say, James, this may be the first time I've regretted not doing video because your smile is just lighting everything up, and it's given me energy for the rest of the afternoon.
All right. That sounds so good.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining me in the comfy chairs. If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with others who are passionate about leading and learning. And don't forget, if you have a question for our new Comfy HQ series, I'd love to hear it. Check out the link in the show notes to submit your question and be part of the conversation. Until next time.